So I'm with the 504th Airborne Unit, and this is my ambulance. It's a 43 ambulance. It was in Europe for the war, and it's been restored to its original condition. So it was in Europe. It was gifted by the U.S. Army to the Dutch in 1950, and the Dutch used it from 50 to 1975, and at which time it was imported back to the United States and spent the rest of its, most of its life, I should say, on a farm in Ipswich. And then I bought it from the farmer in 2018 and restored it.
It's great, so you can drive and everything.
Yeah, I drive it here from Hopkinton.
Okay.
And I'll probably drive it home and bring it back tomorrow.
So were vehicles like this, do they go right up to the battlefield, or?
Yeah, they absolutely, they would, they didn't expect them to be around this long, let's put it that way. The gauge metal is about 16 gauge, the fender's about 14 gauge, a little thicker metal. And if you look at the interior, if you have a chance to look at the interior, it has all of its interior. They would be given a direction to go, and and you would basically go look and find wounded.
I guess sometimes you get wounded yourself.
Yes, absolutely, most definitely.
And what is your tent setup here about?
World War II nursing.
And were you a nurse?
I work for a nursing college out by me.
Okay. So tell me what the experience was for a nurse in those times.
It would have been rough. They didn't have boot camp. They were drafted basically without calling it a draft, because the American government would have been in trouble for that. But what you have to do is you have to do 6 months training in a hospital to be a nurse back then. And at the end of that, you had to sign your name to a Red Cross piece of paper. And then once that happened, the Red Cross then used it to call up all the nurses and send them overseas.
So they did have some special training for doing this kind of stuff, battlefield wounds and stuff.
About 6 months generally, but it was never battle related. It was just in a hospital.
Oh.
So they had no battle training whatsoever before they went.
They were learning on the job.
Exactly.
That's a tough way to learn.
It's a tough way to learn.
So what are some of the implements of healing you have here?
Well, we've got their mobile unit of be like an autoclave, so you would put your sutures or any of your equipment in here that you wanted to sterilize and put this underneath. This is all the different ways you can heat it up depending on how much heat you needed in order to sterilize it. These are some of the cleaners and analgesics that we would have used back then. Malaria medicine, that was big in Africa. Wound tablets for, we had learned in World War I about gangrene, so wound tablets would have been used for first line defense against infection while you're on the battlefield waiting to be picked up and taken to a hospital. So it actually worked out really well. We went from lots of amputations down to very few amputations because we had antibiotics in our system. And these are plasma, some saline, and some whole blood, because we learned during World War II how to ship whole blood.
Ah, interesting. So are there still things that are being used today?
Oh, everything.
Okay.
We figured out how to take malaria drugs while we were in Africa. We figured out the right way to ship whole blood so that it didn't spoil, because the iron will spoil. We learned that whole blood is more important than plasma also. We learned how to dose morphine, because unfortunately we figured out that morphine will cause an overdose. So.
Okay. How did you become involved with this?
My husband. He's been doing it since he was 6 months old. So.
Nursing?
No, reenacting.
Okay.
So he he started in Revolutionary, ended up in World War II, and when we started dating, he asked if I wanted to pick something that I was interested in, and this was it. So.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you very much, Bianca.
Thank you.
All right. Tell me about your tent.
So we're basically showing different medical apparatus from World War II. I'm displaying dog tags. So I have a dog tag maker from World War II. That was one way they identified soldiers, obviously. Had 2 dog tags. One, of course, was if you perished in battle, captain would take the dog tag, and then they knew you were killed in action.
And so the one with the body, or
one was kept with the body, and one was taken with the superior officer, and then they know graves detail would then come get you and give you a proper burial.
So there was a guy that was his specialty. Okay.
Yep.
Frontline aid station here, and you've got anything for just emergency medicine. The idea is to stop bleeding, treat for shock, keep the patient from going into shock, either treat them and patch them up getting back to the front line, or ship them back a little bit further. We'd be about 300 to 500 yards behind the front line here. Further back would be more of a hospital situation where they could do surgery and then but the idea is to either get them back to the front line or get them for proper treatment.
Sure. So show us your gadgets.
Yeah, so this is a litter here. This is for transporting patients. This is a plasma bottle, which would be used for replacement of volume. So a traumatic injury with losing blood, you want to trick the body into thinking that it's not losing volume, so you replace it with plasma to keep them from going into shock. Ultimately, is the goal.
Okay. What's this box of stuff?
And
here?
then you just got a box of you got anything from blood pressure cuffs, stethoscopes, some surgical instruments to foot powders and bandages. It would have been just transported up to the front line to use. Distribute between the medics.
Now, I imagine the medics actually have to do a certain amount of surgery themselves.
Not really. No.
What do they do?
They would do really just controlling blood loss is the main. So treat for that, and then treating for shock, so administering plasma.
So their job was to stop the rampant death
That's correct.
going on.
Yeah.
And get them to the doctor.
Get them to the doctor. Yeah.
So tell me about this ambulance.
Well, this ambulance you see here, the chassis and the engine are all original from 1916, and of course this is what was used by all the volunteer ambulance drivers. Many of them American, paid their own way to France to serve in the ambulances alongside Walt Disney and a gentleman called Edmund Ted Littlefield, who was actually relation to Jacques Littlefield, who's the gentleman that sent all the collection to the Heritage Museum of Tanks.
A lot of this ambulance is made of wood.
Yes, in fact, this one was restored completely about 12 years ago by a gentleman from Connecticut, and then he went over to France to spend 2 years driving around France and in Paris on special occasions, and then he donated this ambulance to us 3 years ago. I believe this was built in America because it was built by the American companies, and then school children from Massachusetts actually donated money to it for the cost of them.
So, what was the experience of driving a vehicle like this?
Well, the conditions of the First World War, as we all know, is horrendous, and the casualties the men that were injured from bomb shrapnel and trench warfare. By the time they got back to a trauma unit and transported in these vehicles over muddy, dirty roads and bumpy as well, the likelihood of them arriving alive was they were lucky if they did.
Now, would the ambulance drivers do anything like a medic would do,
No, they did honoured first aid, but their primary task was transporting them as quickly and safely as possible. And they're all volunteers from many backgrounds, business backgrounds, and very few of them are in the medical profession to start with. And Ted Littlefield, the story that we portray, he actually stayed there for the whole length of the war. Came back to America in 1918, and that.
Now, I imagine this is a pretty dangerous job too, because you're going right up near where the fighting is.
He got injured himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what else should we know about this?
This is fun to drive. I never drove a T Ford or 14 myself until I was able to put my hands on this, and I've been driving this now for 2 years, and it's really interesting.